Professor Morava said my name like she already regretted knowing it. Lena. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the rain hitting the stained glass windows. Not the 50 exhausted students pretending to care about 19th century tragedy. Not even the fact that Professor Elise Arden was standing in the back of a class she had no reason to be in. Just the way my name sounded in Moravas's mouth. Too soft, too familiar. Too much like something that had lived inside her for a long time. I looked up without meaning to. She was staring at me. Not in the normal professor way. Not like she was trying to remember if I'd submitted an essay or skipped last week's lecture. This was different, the kind of look that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up. Like she wasn't seeing me for the first time. Like she was seeing someone she had already lost. And the worst part? Professor Arden looked exactly the same. She was near the back wall, one hand resting against the last row of seats, watching me with this strange stillness that made the whole room feel wrong. Not tense exactly, just off. Like something had entered the lecture hall that wasn't supposed to be there. Me, if I were smarter, maybe I would have looked away. Maybe I would have packed my bag the second class ended and never given either of them another reason to remember my face. But that's the thing about moments that ruin your life. They never feel big enough at the start. But I noticed the way Professor Voss froze at the front of the room. I noticed how her hand tightened around the piece of chalk until a white line snapped across her knuckles. And I noticed Professor Elise Arden, who never attended anyone else's lectures, who barely tolerated colleagues, who was standing in the back of the hall for reasons no one had explained, lift her head sharply the exact same moment she heard my name. 2 women. 2 professors. 2 faces that had until then belonged to the safest category in my life. Distant, brilliant, unavailable. That changed in a second, because they looked at me as if I had stepped out of a grave they had visited too often. I should start somewhere cleaner than that. Somewhere normal. Somewhere that would make this sound less like the opening of a confession, and more like a series of unfortunate coincidences. But there was nothing normal about Blackthorn University in late October. Not if you stayed long enough to see what happened after the sun went down. The campus looked innocent in the daytime. Ivy on stone walls, bronze plaques polished by decades of passing hands, students with coffee cups and deadlines and badly hidden breakdowns. The kind of place parents photographed and called prestigious. The kind of place scholarship students like me entered with perfect posture and a permanent awareness that we could be expelled from paradise for breathing wrong. At night, though, Blackthorn changed shape. The buildings held onto the dark in a way modern campuses didn't. The old library became a cathedral for secrets. The narrow faculty corridors swallowed sound. Windows reflected more than they revealed. Every tower and archway seemed built to remind you that institutions outlived the people they consumed. I had been on campus for 11 weeks when everything started. Long enough to know which professors terrified everyone. Long enough to know which office doors stayed closed and which secrets students traded in dorm kitchens after midnight. Long enough to know the names Moravas and Elise Arden carried weight. Professor Voss taught comparative myth and narrative structures. Students spoke about her the way people spoke about winter storms. Beautiful from a distance, dangerous up close. She was famous for impossible reading lists, surgical feedback, and a presence that could still a room without her raising her voice. She dressed in dark neutrals that made her pale skin look almost luminous under old classroom lights. She never smiled at the wrong time. She never explained more than she needed to. Every sentence from her mouth sounded like it had been revised in fire before she allowed anyone else to hear it. Professor Arden belonged to the psychology department, though belonged was the wrong word for her or anything else. She moved through campus like she owned no one and nothing. Least of all herself, students adored her because she listened too closely and remembered too much. She made eye contact like a skill and a weapon. She wore softness over sharpness, warmth over distance, and that made her more dangerous than Voss in ways most people never understood until it was far too late. I knew them the way every graduate student eventually knew powerful faculty, by reputation first, then by silhouette, then by the very particular anxiety of receiving an email from their department. What I did not know, what no one told me when I arrived on scholarship with 2 suitcases and 1 iron rule, never to become interesting to powerful people, was that those 2 women had once built their lives around a girl no one on campus said the name of anymore. A girl whose photograph had never been removed from their private grief. A girl whose absence had not faded with time, but sharpened. A girl who, according to some old rumor, vanished before graduation and took something irretrievable with her. I would learn all of that later. At first, all I knew was this. When Professor Voss said my name for the first time, she looked like she had touched a live wire. The lecture ended 11 minutes early, nobody complained. She closed her notes, dismissed the room, and stood perfectly still while chairs scraped, bags zipped, and 100 exhausted students surged toward the doors. I packed slowly, more out of habit than intention. I was always one of the last to leave classrooms. It saved me from the hallway crush and the small humiliations of accidental social interaction. When I glanced up, Professor Arden was still standing in the back row. She had not spoken once during the lecture. She had not taken notes. She had only watched, not the class. Me, the realization came so suddenly, I nearly shoved my pen into the wrong pocket. Get over yourself, I told myself immediately. Professors do not fixate on students. Not like that. Not both at once. Then Voss said, "Miss Vale, a moment, please." The room emptied around me. I straightened slowly. My scholarship paperwork lived in permanent fear inside my bloodstream. Every time a faculty member used that tone, I assumed disaster. A missing form, a flawed draft, a funding issue. A polite prelude to being told that people like me had reached the limit of what institutions were willing to tolerate. I walked down the steps toward the front desk. Arden had already moved from the back of the hall and now stood by the side windows with her hands folded loosely in front of her. Calm, silent, studying me in a way that made my skin feel too tight. Voss looked at my face for 1 second too long. Then another. "You're in the Langley Fellowship cohort," she said. "Yes. And your undergraduate work was done in Northbridge?" "Yes." Her jaw flexed almost imperceptibly. "How old are you?" I blinked. 24. Something passed between them. Not words, not visible enough to name, but something. Arden spoke for the first time. "Did you know any family in the city before coming here?" "No." "Any relatives in the region?" "No." Another look, another silence. Then Voss, "Do people often tell you that you resemble someone?" That was the moment the air changed. Until then, I could have explained the questions away. Administrative curiosity, faculty eccentricity, the strange invasive habits of academics who forgot social boundaries existed outside conferences. But that question did something to the room. It reached into it and turned the light colder. "I don't know," I said carefully. "Sometimes, not anyone specific." Arden's gaze dropped to the small scar near my wrist, a childhood accident, barely visible. Yet the way she looked at it made my hand curl instinctively into a fist. Professor Voss stepped back first. "Of course, forgive us, there is no issue." Issue? Such a strange word for what flickered over her face. Arden smiled then, and the smile was gentle enough to be trusted by someone less tired than me. "We were mistaken. About what?" I wanted to ask. Instead, I said, "Am I in some kind of trouble?" No. Voss answered immediately. "Yes," Arden said at the exact same time. The silence after that should have been impossible. Voss turned her head toward Arden very slowly. Elise. Arden did not look away from me. "Not with us." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means," Voss said, her voice now clipped and cold enough to slice cleanly through the room, "that Professor Arden is overstepping." "I?" Arden asked lightly. Something old and ugly flashed in Voss's eyes. Something so intimate I felt embarrassed for witnessing it. Then Arden's expression softened again, and for one dizzy moment she looked less like a professor and a woman trying very hard not to frighten a wounded animal. "Miss Vale," she said, "if anything unusual happens in the next few days, anything at all, you come directly to one of us. Do you understand?" I laughed once before I could stop myself. Not because it was funny, because I did not know what else to do. Anything unusual? Yes. This is already unusual. That, unexpectedly, made Arden's mouth twitch. Not amusement, recognition. Voss picked up her satchel. "You may go." I should have gone. Instead, I asked the question that split the first clean seam in everything. "Who do I look like?" Neither woman answered. And that silence followed me all the way out of the lecture hall, down the stone stairs, through the wet courtyard, and back to my dorm room, where I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing my coat while rain tapped at the window like a patient warning. My roommate, Priya, took one glance at my face and said, "Either you got excellent news or someone died." Neither. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed into her chair. "Bald seminar?" "Strange seminar." She squinted. "That's worse." I told her a diluted version of what happened. 2 professors, odd questions, mistaken identity. No details that would make the whole thing sound as unsettling as it actually felt. Priya listened with her usual expression of thoughtful chaos. Maybe you just look like some alum. Then why were they acting like they'd seen a ghost? That's academia. Everyone acts like they've seen a ghost. It's half the branding. I wanted that to calm me. It didn't. Maybe because something had shifted in me, the second Professor Arden told me to go to them if anything unusual happened. The sentence implied expectation, not possibility, not caution, expectation. As if something had already started moving, as if they had recognized the first pattern and were waiting for the rest. By midnight, I had convinced myself I was being dramatic. By 1 in the morning, I had almost fallen asleep over an article I was pretending to read. At 1:17, my phone buzzed unknown number. I stared at it for 3 full seconds before opening the message. You should not let them see you alone. Every trace of sleep vanished. I sat up in bed hard enough to creak the frame. Priya mumbled something incoherent from across the room and turned over. I typed back before I could think better of it. Who is this? Nothing then, another message. They remember too well. My fingers went cold. I got out of bed, crossed the room, and checked the lock even though this was a secure dorm with cameras and key cards, and every assurance institutions offered people they failed all the time. When I looked back at my phone, a third message had appeared. If they ask about Celia, lie Celia, a name I had never heard, a name that seemed to rearrange the air around me. I typed again, who are you? How did you get this number? No response. By morning, the messages were still there, undeniable and stupidly bright on my screen, like proof left by a dream that refused to disappear with daylight. I skipped breakfast, spent an hour rereading my thesis notes without retaining a single line, considered going to campus security. Didn't, because what would I say? Hello, someone texted me a warning about 2 professors who asked if I resembled a woman named Celia. Yes, I know how that sounds. No, they didn't threaten me directly. No, I don't know what any of it means. I went to the library instead. That was always my mistake. Whenever life sharpened, I tried to disappear into work, as if enough footnotes could protect a person, as if research were a room no danger could enter. The 4th floor of Blackthorn's old library was my favorite, because nobody wanted to climb that high unless desperation had already stripped them of dignity. Tall windows, dusty radiators, long oak tables scarred by decades of anxious hands. The kind of silence that did not comfort so much as absorb. I found a corner seat, opened my laptop, and almost managed 45 minutes of concentration before someone sat across from me. I looked up. Professor Arden. Not possible, my mind said immediately. Not here, not unannounced. Not looking like that. She wore a charcoal coat over a cream blouse, rain still dark on the shoulders. Her hair was pinned up badly, as if she had redone it in a hurry and lost patience halfway through. She set a paper cup of coffee on the table near my left hand. You skipped breakfast, she said. I stared at her. How do you know that? She glanced toward the pastry bag tucked unopened in my backpack side pocket. Because you still have the croissant from yesterday. I looked down automatically. She was right. And somehow that unsettled me more than if she had admitted to following me. I don't think professors are supposed to appear in libraries like this, I said. Professors appear in libraries constantly. It's one of our most tedious qualities. I did not smile. Neither did she. She leaned forward slightly. Did anyone contact you? There it was. The expectation from yesterday taking shape. My phone felt heavier in my pocket. I don't know what you mean. Arden held my gaze long enough for the lie to become embarrassing then. She sat back and nodded once as if confirming something to herself. Good then, whoever it is hasn't moved this quickly. Who is whoever it is? Before she could answer, a familiar shadow crossed the table. Professor Voss placed a folder down beside the coffee cup without sitting. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? She asked Arden. Arden did not turn. Notice what? That you would come here first. Voss's attention shifted to me. Miss Vale, you should not be alone. Heat rose instantly to my face. Part anger, part humiliation, part something harder to survive. I'm in a public library. For now, Voss said. Arden's voice stayed maddeningly calm. Mira? No. Voss's eyes remained on mine. Not this time. This time. There it was again, a history pressing at the edges of their sentences. I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor loud enough to earn us 3 annoyed glances from nearby students. Someone tell me what is going on? For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Voss slid the folder toward me. Inside was a photograph, not glossy, not recent, old enough that the corners had softened with handling. 3 figures stood in a garden beside a stone wall swallowed in summer ivy. The image had yellowed with time, but the faces were clear. Professor Arden younger, laughing openly. Professor Voss, not smiling. but with her hand resting possessively at the waist of the girl between them. And the girl. My breath left me so completely I had to grip the edge of the table. She did not merely resemble me. She looked like a version of me, assembled from better light and older heartbreak, same face shape, same mouth, same dark eyes, same impossible tilt to the brows that made us look skeptical even in stillness. There were differences. Her hair was longer, her posture looser. She looked like someone who had once believed joy could be trusted. But the resemblance was so violent it made the room blur. On the back in neat handwriting, 2 words, July again. My fingers trembled. "Who is she?" I whispered. Voss answered, "Celia Morrow." Arden's gaze never left my face. She disappeared 4 years ago. The library around us seemed to recede. Voices, footsteps, page turns. Everything went distant. Disappeared how? We don't know. You're lying. Voss inhaled once through her nose. A tiny fracture in otherwise perfect control. We know she left campus. We know she was supposed to meet us that night. We know she never arrived. We know every trace of her after 7:12 p.m. dissolved. Arden added quietly, and we know the first anonymous message came the next morning. The phone in my pocket might as well have turned to ice. Voss saw it, Arden saw her see it, and everything in the air between the 3 of us changed at once. "You were contacted," Voss said. I should have lied. The message from the unknown number flashed in my head. "If they ask about Celia, lie." Instead, I pulled out my phone and placed it face up on the table. Arden read the texts first. Then Voss. The color drained from Voss's face so quickly it felt indecent to witness. Arden's reaction was quieter but worse. She went still in the way some people do right before anger takes full possession of them. "When?" Arden asked. "Last night. And you told no one." No one seemed like a reasonable person to tell. That landed. Especially on Voss, a muscle jumped in her jaw. "Fair." Arden took my phone, photographed the screen with her own, then handed it back. "You're coming with us." "Absolutely not," Voss said. "This is not optional." I laughed again. A sharp, disbelieving sound that earned us more stares. "You don't get to say that to me." Something dangerous flickered in Voss's eyes. But Arden moved first, voice low and steady. "Lena, listen carefully. 4 years ago a woman we loved vanished after receiving messages nearly identical to these. We were not cautious enough. We will not make that mistake again. Loved. Not supervised, not mentored, loved." The word hit like a dropped object in still water, sending rings through every other fact. I stared at her, at Voss. Back at the photograph, everything made a strange and terrible kind of sense. The intensity. The silence, the shock in the lecture hall. "You were both with her," I said. Neither denied it. Voss's expression became unreadable stone. "This is not the place." "Then maybe tell me the place." I snapped. Arden leaned closer. "Our offices. Together. Now, I should say this plainly. The smart decision would have been to leave. Walk straight out of the library. Call campus security. Call Priya. Call literally anyone less emotionally catastrophic than the 2 women who had just admitted they once loved a student who looked almost exactly like me. Instead, I went with them. I tell myself now it was because of the messages. Because fear makes bad strategies look like instincts. Because they knew more than I did. And danger always seems easier to survive when it has a face. That is not the whole truth. The whole truth is uglier. I went because, when Professor Arden asked, something in me leaned toward her. I went because when Professor Voss said it wasn't optional, some reckless part of me wanted to see what happened when she stopped speaking like a professor and started speaking like the woman in the photograph. I went because they looked ruined by the sight of me. And ruined people are magnets to other ruined things. Their offices were on opposite sides of the faculty wing. But neither led me to either door. Instead, Voss unlocked a narrow archive room at the end of a dim corridor I had passed 100 times without noticing. It smelled like old paper, cedar shelves, and the cold mineral scent of spaces sunlight had never fully claimed. No windows, one long table. Locked cabinets lining the walls. Arden closed the door behind us, not locked. Just closed still. The sound made my pulse jump. Voss set the folder on the table. "Sit." I stayed standing. "So you can tell me I'm a coincidence?" "No," Arden said. "Because we are past the point where that lie would be useful." Useful, not kind. Not necessary useful. I took the chair nearest the door. Deliberately, Arden noticed. Her mouth softened for half a second, as if she respected the move. Voss remained standing opposite me while Arden leaned against a filing cabinet with her arms folded. The 2 of them did not touch, did not even stand especially close. And yet every inch of the room carried the outline of something old and unfinished between them. Voss spoke first. Celia arrived at Blackthorn 6 years ago on a scholarship. The parallel hit instantly. She studied literature and cognitive theory. She was brilliant, difficult, funny when she wanted to be, very young. Arden closed her eyes briefly at that. Too young. Voss ignored her. We met because she took one of Elise's seminars, and then found her way into one of my independent reading groups. You fell in love with her, I said. Arden's answer was so soft I almost missed it. Yes. Voss's came sharper, against our better judgment. Did she love you back? The silence that followed was answer enough. Arden looked at me then in a way that made it impossible to look away. Enough to ruin all three of us. Rain hit the building harder outside, a hollow drumming through stone walls. What happened the night she disappeared? Voss reached into the folder and pulled out a printout of a message thread. Names removed, numbers blacked out. Still, the shape of it was obvious at 6:52 p.m. Running late. Don't glare. At 7:01 p.m. You're both impossible. Buy me tea if you want forgiveness. At 7:12 p.m. I think someone's following me. That was the last message. My throat tightened. Arden took over then. Perhaps because Voss could not. At 8:03, the first anonymous email arrived. It said we would never see her again if we kept looking. Did you go to the police? Yes. And? They investigated. Voss's voice turned to glass. Celia was an adult. There were no signs of violence. Her phone was later found in the river. Her apartment looked undisturbed. Eventually, the case went cold. But you didn't believe she just left. Know that from both of them. I looked down at the photograph again. At the girl between them, smiling like summer could last. Why are you telling me all this? Voss answered honestly enough to hurt. Because the moment we saw you, we knew someone else would, too. A knock hit the archive door. All three of us froze. Another knock. Then a voice from the hallway. Professor Voss? Professor Arden? Male. Administrative. Too casual. Voss's face changed instantly. The softness, if she had ever allowed herself any, vanished. Arden moved away from the cabinet and stood closer to me without touching me. Who is it? Voss called Dean Holloway. Could I have a word? Arden and Voss exchanged a look that belonged to a language I did not speak. Voss leaned down, voice low enough that only I could hear. Do not mention the messages. Then she opened the door. Dean Holloway stood in the hall with an umbrella tucked under one arm and a smile too polished for the hour. He was in his late 50s, silver at the temples, immaculate in the way administrators often were when the rest of campus was wet and disordered. He looked first at Voss, then Arden, then me. And something in that smile cooled Miss Vale. He said pleasantly, how unusual. I had seen him only once before at an orientation reception, where he shook scholarship students' hands as if blessing future donor material. Something about him had unsettled me then, too. Maybe the easy benevolence. Maybe the way people like him always seemed to know exactly where to place concern so it resembled ownership. We're in the middle of something. Voss said, so I gathered. His gaze returned to me. Miss Vale. I hope you're settling in well. Fine, thank you. Arden's posture had gone subtly rigid beside me. Voss did not move at all. The dean smiled wider. I wanted to remind you both that the donor dinner schedule changed. Tomorrow evening. Not Friday, and you, he added to me, should check your student account tonight. There may be updated fellowship documentation, requiring your signature. Something about the phrasing made Voss sharpen. Why would a first-year fellow have updated paperwork in week 11? The dean shrugged elegantly. Administrative cleanup. You know how these things are. No one in the room looked like they believed him. Then, with one final glance at me that lasted a fraction too long, he stepped back. Don't stay too late. He walked away down the corridor. Voss shut the door, locked it this time. What was that? I asked. Arden's eyes were on the wood as if she could still see through it. A problem. Voss turned to me. If your student account changes in any way tonight, you tell us immediately. Why? Because Holloway was on the disciplinary committee 4 years ago. My mouth went dry. For you? For Celia, Arden said. Officially. The room seemed to tilt. I should have left then, I know that. But fear is strange. Once it accepts the fact of danger, it often stops fighting the method of it. Instead of leaving, I heard myself ask, was he the one sending the messages? No, Voss said. If it were Holloway, he wouldn't come announce himself. Arden exhaled slowly. But he knows something has started. My phone buzzed in my hand. All three of us looked down. Unknown number. I opened it. You should not have shown them. Then another. Now they'll keep you where they can see you. Another. That's how it began for her, too. I looked up. Arden had gone pale. Voss looked furious in a way that somehow frightened me less than it should have. I'm going back to my dorm, I said. No, Voss said. Yes, I snapped. Arden moved then, stepping between me and the table, but not the door. Careful enough that I noticed, Lena. I am not staying in a locked room with 2 professors who have admitted they were involved with a student who disappeared. The truth of that landed like an open wound. Arden flinched. Voss did not. You shouldn't. Voss said, it took me a second to understand. You agree? No, I'm saying you shouldn't stay here. She reached into her coat for a set of keys. You shouldn't go to the dorm either. Arden stared at her Mira. She has already been contacted. Holloway is circling, the account warning was not random. Voss looked at me, and for one brief second, every layer of discipline dropped enough for me to see the thing underneath. Fear so intense, it had become a form of devotion. If this is starting again, I will not let them corner you in a student residence with cameras that can be edited and staff that can be pressured, Arden said quietly. Our house. The words landed harder than anything else so far. House, not apartments. Not separate lives. A shared place. A life that had once clearly held room for a third. No, I said immediately. Neither argued for a beat. Then Arden did the last thing I expected. She pulled a chair out, sat across from me, and lowered her voice until it sounded nothing like authority. Then let me ask you a better question. If you go back to your dorm tonight and something happens, if your funding disappears, if security is sent for you, if whoever is watching decides to stop messaging and start acting, who protects you? Myself? Her expression did not mock me. That would have been easier. Instead, it broke a little. That is a brutal answer for someone your age. I've had practice. Something passed over Voss's face. Anger, but not at me, at the world, maybe at systems. At whoever had taught me that answer so well. Arden folded her hands together. Come for one night. Keep your phone on. Keep your shoes by the door. Don't trust us if you don't want to. But let us keep you where we can see you long enough to work out what has begun. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to stand up and walk out and reclaim the shape of my life before these women and their ghost story crawled into it. Instead, I asked, why do you care this much? Silence, then Voss answered with terrible precision. Because grief has made us many ugly things, but careless is no longer one of them. That should not have convinced me. It did. I texted Priya that I was staying with faculty to review archival materials for a fellowship opportunity and would be back tomorrow. She replied with 3 question marks and a skull emoji. I did not elaborate. The house stood off campus behind iron gates and old trees that held rainwater and black leaves. It was the kind of place I would have imagined either woman living in. From outside, it looked severe. Stone, slate roof, narrow windows lit from within like measured secrets. Inside, it was warmer than I expected, dark wood floors, long shelves, low lamps, no clutter, but not cold. Lived in deeply carefully. And everywhere, the quiet evidence of 2 lives that had intertwined so completely neither could be mistaken for accidental. A coat draped over one chair that clearly belonged to Arden. Books stacked near the fireplace that clearly belonged to Voss. A half-finished puzzle on the sunroom table that belonged, impossibly, to both. I noticed all of it because I was trying not to notice the larger thing, the ache of a third shape in the room, the feeling that the house had once arranged itself around someone smaller, younger beloved. Arden showed me the guest room upstairs. Voss checked every window and locked every exterior door. Neither woman touched me, neither came too close. That should have reassured me. It did not. Because restraint can be more intimate than hunger, when you can see how much effort it costs. The guest room overlooked the back garden. There was fresh water on the nightstand, a stack of folded towels, and a sweater laid neatly across the end of the bed. It's cold in this wing, Arden said from the doorway. That was the warmest spare one I could find. I touched the sleeve, soft, worn, not mine. Whose is it? Arden hesitated. The pause said enough. Celia's, I said. A shadow crossed her face. Yes. You kept her clothes. We kept many things. Why? From downstairs, Voss's voice carried faintly. Because throwing them away would have made it too final. I do not know what expression moved across my face then, only that Arden saw it and stepped back half an inch as if to give me room to survive it. You do not have to wear it, she said. After she left, I stood alone in the room with the sweater in my hands, and felt the first clean ripple of dread that had nothing to do with anonymous messages or deans or disappearances. It had to do with tenderness, with evidence of love that had not decayed, only changed form, with the terrifying possibility that I could feel its gravity before I even understood its direction. I did not wear the sweater. I draped it over the chair and went downstairs in my own clothes. They were in the kitchen arguing softly. Not the theatrical kind of argument some couples perform with confidence and eventual forgiveness. This was older than that. Sharper, a wound they knew how to circle without deciding whether to heal or deepen it. "You should have told her earlier," Arden was saying. "And said what?" Voss replied. "That the second she walked into my lecture hall I forgot how to breathe? That I have not slept properly since? That every instinct I have is now split between protecting her and running before history repeats, in a different costume? I should have backed away. Instead, I stayed in the hallway just long enough to hear Arden say, very quietly, 'You are not the only one shaken by her.' Then the floor creaked under me. They both turned. I have never seen two people rearrange themselves so quickly. The argument vanished from their faces. Not erased, controlled. Arden reached for 3 mugs. Voss leaned one hand against the counter and became all composure again. "I can go back upstairs," I said. "No," Arden said. "You should eat something." "I'm not hungry." "That has not stopped being a bad idea just because it's true," Voss said. The line was unexpectedly dry, unexpectedly human, and because the night had already become surreal, I almost smiled. Arden noticed. Something in her gaze softened so quickly I nearly looked away. We ate soup and bread at a narrow kitchen table, while rain slid down black windows, and the house held its breath around us. They told me practical things first. The Wi-Fi password, the location of the downstairs alarm, which hallway floorboard stuck if I stepped on it too hard, everything except what mattered most. So eventually I asked anyway. "Did you love each other before Celia?" Voss went still. Arden set down her spoon very carefully. "No," Arden said. Voss added, "Not in any way we could admit." I looked between them. And after, a corner of Arden's mouth lifted, sad and crooked. After nothing remained untouched. "Did she bring you together?" "No," Voss said. "Yes," Arden said at the same time. The old friction flashed again. Arden folded her hands in front of her. We were already orbiting each other. Celia made collision inevitable. Voss looked down at her bowl and then made survival afterward impossible any other way. Silence sat with us. Not empty, crowded. I should have stopped asking questions. Instead, I asked the one that had been tightening itself inside my chest all evening. "Do I really look that much like her?" Neither answered immediately. Finally, Arden said, "Enough to hurt." Voss looked at me then, directly, with the kind of honesty most people reserve for priests and executioners. Enough that when you turned your head in class, I thought I was either having a breakdown or being punished. My spoon slipped from my fingers into the soup. The sound was absurdly loud. No one laughed. The house alarm chirped twice. 3 heads turned toward the wall panel at once. Voss was on her feet first. Arden stood so fast her chair tipped backward. "What was that?" I whispered. "Perimeter gate," Voss said. "It's after 11. Arden was already moving toward the front hall. "Nobody should be here." Voss looked at me once. "Stay in the kitchen." Which, of course, ensured I would not. I followed them into the hallway just in time to see the security monitor flicker. One camera and another, then static. My blood went cold. Arden swore under her breath. Voss grabbed her phone and dialed someone without taking her eyes off the screen. No answer. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened it with shaking fingers. "You should have taken the sweater." She always slept in that room when they argued. All the air left my lungs. Another message arrived. "Look at the front step." Arden saw my face. "What?" I held out the phone. Voss's expression changed when she read it. Not fear, not exactly, something darker. Something like fury braided with memory. Arden moved to the side window and pulled back the curtain 1/2 inch. Then she went utterly motionless. "What is it?" I said. She stepped aside. On the front step, under the yellow spill of the porch light and the hard silver rain, lay a bouquet of white lilies bound with black ribbon. On top of them sat an old Polaroid. Even from inside, I recognized my own face or hers or whatever awful boundary had ceased to exist between us. Voss opened the front door before either Arden or I could stop her. Rain blew in across the threshold. She crossed the porch in 2 strides, snatched up the bouquet and photograph, and came back inside drenched at the shoulders. Jaw set, like carved stone. The photograph was recent. That was the worst part. Not the house, not campus, my dorm room. Taken from outside the window, I was in it, half-turned changing my shirt, unaware. On the back, written in narrow black ink, "They keep the dead alive by borrowing the living." Arden went white, Voss did not. Her anger had moved beyond visible temperature into something colder. "We're done waiting," she said. "For what?" "For permission." Arden looked at her for 1 second, then nodded once. The decision between them happened so fast. I felt left behind by a train I had accidentally boarded. Voss turned to me. There is something in this house we did not intend to show you. That sentence should have sent me running. Instead, I asked, what? Arden answered, everything we kept. The locked room was in the west wing, behind a door so ordinary I would never have chosen it twice with my eyes. Voss unlocked it with a key from a chain under her blouse. Arden turned on the light. It was not a shrine. That would have been easier to categorize, more grotesque perhaps, but cleaner. Boxes labeled by month, files arranged in chronological order, a wall of shelves holding journals, transcripts, official case documents, copies of police reports, printed emails, maps, train schedules, photographs, voice recorder tapes, campus directories, and more books than grief should ever be allowed to annotate. At the center stood a long table covered in evidence folders, not scattered, not obsessive in the messy way people imagined obsession. Worse, methodical. Devoted, lived with. I stepped inside before I could decide not to. For 4 years, while the campus forgot, they had not. They had built a second life around remembering. This is insane, I whispered. Arden's voice came from behind me. Yes. Voss crossed to the table and opened a folder with hands steadier than mine would ever be. But not useless. She turned several pages and stopped at a photograph clipped to a written statement. A woman in a faculty coat standing near the south gate, silver at the temples, immaculate, Dean Holloway. Celia saw him the week she vanished, Voss said. Arden moved beside her. Not alone, with a trustee named Lena Vale. My body went rigid. What? Voss looked up. You recognize the surname. My surname, I said slowly. Arden's face changed. Not surprise, dread. As if a feared hypothesis had just crossed into proof. Voss flipped through another file and slid a photocopy across the table. Board minutes, donor attendance, benefactor names. Halfway down the list, Lena Vale, trustee, Vale Foundation for Ethics and Education. My mother's name, no. No, that was impossible. The room narrowed. I don't understand. Arden reached for the back of a chair as if steadying herself too. Lena, what does your mother do? She runs a foundation, educational grants, policy work, donor boards. Voss closed her eyes for one hard second. Of course she does. Explain. No one moved. Then Arden said what Voss would not. Celia's legal surname was also Vale. The floor dropped out from under me. No, we only found that later, Arden went on, voice careful now, like she was approaching a fracture line. She used Morrow socially. Vale appeared on one sealed administrative document connected to external funding. My pulse was a scream in my throat. Are you saying she was related to me? We don't know. That is not good enough. Voss's voice came rough. It is all we had. I stepped back from the table, then another step. The air felt thin, overused. My mother, Blackthorn, trustees, a missing girl who wore my face, 2 professors who had loved her, anonymous messages that began the moment they saw me. Somewhere inside the panic, a memory surfaced. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just small and ugly and suddenly sharp. When I told my mother I had accepted Blackthorn's scholarship, she had gone quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, too evenly, "There are older institutions more dangerous than they look." At the time, I thought she meant elitism. Now I wasn't sure what she meant at all. My phone buzzed again, unreal number. I nearly dropped it opening the message. Ask them what happened in the observatory. I looked up slowly. Both women saw the shift in my face. What observatory? I asked. Arden swore again, softer this time. Voss's shoulders went rigid, no one spoke. I laughed, but it came out wrong. Amazing. Even now, you still leave out the parts that matter most. Lena, Arden began. No, tell me, Voss said flatly. The night before Celia vanished, we had an argument. About? Arden answered this one. You, I stared, her expression broke. Not you, not literally, someone who looked like you. The room stopped making sense. Voss moved around the table, closer now, every line of her body tight with control. A week before she disappeared, Celia saw a girl outside the old observatory. She followed her. She was convinced what? Arden looked at me with unbearable directness. That she had found her sister. I could hear my own heartbeat. Each pulse a blunt impact. Sister? Yes. I don't have a sister. Neither woman corrected me. That frightened me more than if they had. Voss's voice had lowered to something almost intimate, almost dangerous. Celia told us she had been separated from a younger half-sister as a child. Family conflict, sealed guardianship, money, reputation. She had spent years trying to trace what happened. Then she saw a girl on campus one evening and believed, perhaps irrationally, perhaps not, that the girl was her, Arden added. We argued because we thought grief and stress were distorting her judgment. She was angry with us, especially with me. A tiny fracture crossed Voss's composure. She left before midnight. The next day, she disappeared. I could not feel my hands anymore. So you think I'm that sister? Silence. Then Arden said, we think someone else may think so too. The distinction was cruel, too careful, maybe necessary. I backed into the edge of the table. Papers shifted. One folder slid open. A page slipped free. An intake form, handwritten, a child's placement record. Most lines blacked out. I saw only 3 unredacted details before Voss reached for it. T-mail, age 6. Temporary name assigned, Elena Guardian Review Board. Vale Foundation liaison approved. I stepped back so fast my shoulder hit the shelf. Where did you get that? No one answered fast enough. My voice rose. Where did you get that? Arden said. A private investigator found it through a records breach 3 years ago. We never had enough to verify. Elena, I said, the temporary name, not Lena, Elena. What my mother called me only when she was angry enough to want distance. The room pitched. I think I would have fallen if Voss had not reached for me. Not grabbed, reached. Open hand, choice given. I should not have taken it. I did. Her palm was warm, steady. Too steady for someone who was shaking inside as visibly as she had in that lecture hall. Sit down, she said. I ripped my hand away. Don't. The word hurt her. I saw it happen. Good, I told myself. It should hurt. Everything should. Then the power went out. Kaleep darkness swallowed the room. Not dimming. Not a flicker. Gone. Somewhere in the house, a low backup system began to beep. Arden's voice cut through the dark. Lena? Here, Voss was already moving. I could hear her in the blackness, fast and precise. A drawer opening. Metal against wood. Phone lights off, she said. If someone killed the Mains, we do not tell them where we are. A sound came from downstairs. Glass, then a slow, deliberate footstep. Not imagination. Not settling wood. Someone in the house. My whole body went cold. Arden found my wrist in the dark. Her touch was feather light, a question more than a grip. When I didn't pull away, her fingers closed just enough to anchor me. Voss's voice came from somewhere to our left. West stairwell. Quietly. We moved through darkness. Guided by phone glow, turned against the floor for 1 second at a time. The archive room door opened without a sound. The hallway beyond was deeper black. Another footstep below, then a voice male. Pleasant. Familiar. Professor Voss. Dean Holloway called softly from the dark. Arden's nails bit into my wrist. Voss did not answer. He went on, as if we were all merely delayed at a reception. You should not have brought her here. My breath caught another step. I warned you once what happens when private grief is mistaken for entitlement. Voss said into the dark, stay behind me. Whether to Arden or me or both, I could not tell. Holloway laughed once. Interesting. That is exactly what you told Celia. The words struck like an open hand. Beside me, Arden inhaled sharply. So it was you, she said. No. Holloway sounded amused. Nothing so simple, I only manage consequences. You of all people should understand institutions run on that. A beam of light flashed suddenly from below, sweeping the hall. Voss shoved us backward into an alcove a split second before it reached us. Her body pressed mine against the wall. Arden pressed close on my other side. 3 heartbeats in one narrow pocket of darkness. I could smell rain on Voss's coat, soap and cedar on Arden's skin. And under both, the impossible electric note of fear sharpened by desire no one here should have been feeling. Holloway's flashlight beam passed over the corridor and away. My pulse was a disaster. Not because of danger alone, because Voss's hand had come up by reflex to shield my shoulder, because Arden's fingers were spread lightly at my waist to keep me silent and balanced, because terrified bodies do not ask permission before recognizing heat. The beam moved back. This time it paused. Come now, Holloway said. You can't hide her forever. You never could keep the girls you wanted. Something in Voss snapped. She moved before Arden could stop her. Out of the alcove, down 2 steps, into the light, the flashlight swung. A struggle erupted so fast my brain refused it for a full second. The beam crashed into the wall. Holloway cursed. Voss hit him hard enough to send both into the stair rail with a crack of wood. Arden shoved me backward. Run to the kitchen. Second drawer by the stove. Alarm remote. Go. I'm not leaving you. Lena. Her voice on my name did it. I ran down the side hall through darkness, hands on walls. The house no longer looked elegant in emergency shadow. It looked old and full of hiding places. Behind me, I heard Arden join the struggle. A thud, a curse, the sound of something glass shattering. I found the kitchen by smell before sight. Metal counters, cold tile. My hands slammed drawers open until I found a small black remote panel. I hit the only red switch. Sirens exploded through the house. Not police. Internal alarm. Deafening, violent, Immediate, lights flickered on in emergency mode, dim red strips along the floor. Enough to see by. I ran back. Holloway was on one knee at the foot of the stairs, blood at his mouth, one hand inside his coat. Voss stood 3 steps above him, breathing hard. Arden was beside the rail, one sleeve torn, eyes bright with a fury so cold it looked almost calm. "Don't," she said, too late. Holloway pulled out not a gun, but a sheaf of folded papers sealed in plastic against the rain. He flung them across the floor toward me. "They deserve each other," he spat. "But not you." The siren still screamed. No one moved for half a second, then Voss grabbed his wrist. Arden kicked his hand away. A key ring skittered across the floor. Somewhere outside, the front gate began to open under emergency override. Security would come. Neighbors, perhaps, someone. Holloway laughed through blood and rainwater and ruin. Ask them why Celia really ran. Voss hit him again. Hard this time. He stayed down. The world narrowed to breath and red light and the papers at my feet. Arden looked at them like they might explode. Voss looked at me like she knew exactly what would happen if I picked them up, and had already accepted she could not stop it. So I picked them up. The top page was a transcript, not official, personal, typed, marked with handwritten corrections. At the top, statement from Celia Morrow unsent. My hands shook so badly the pages rattled. Lena. Arden said a warning, a plea. I read anyway. Not every line. I could not. There was too much history pressing all at once, but enough. Enough to understand that Celia had not been simply abducted, not simply chased, not simply erased. She had been planning to leave. Not because she did not love them, because she did. Too much. Enough to feel consumed by it. Enough to fear becoming answerable to it forever. Enough to mistake intensity for inevitability, and then panic when devotion began to resemble enclosure. There were lines crossed out, then rewritten. I know they love me. That is not the problem. The problem is that grief lives inside Mira even before loss. And Elise wants to heal whatever she touches until nothing can leave her hands unchanged. I am happiest with them and most afraid of disappearing into them. I keep thinking if I leave for a while, they will become people again instead of weather. My vision blurred. I read further, a name. Mary Ann Vale meeting requested. Records, younger sister, truth hidden. Money exchanged, and then the final line on the page. If they tell you I vanished, understand this. I chose the first step. I do not know who chose the rest. The siren cut off. Silence crashed down so suddenly it rang. Security pounded at the front door. Voices. Orders. The gate must have opened them and nobody moved. Not me, not Arden, not Voss, not even Holloway half-conscious on the floor. Because everything had changed again, not into clarity, into something worse. A truth split 3 ways. Celia had tried to leave. Someone had known. Someone had intervened after. And whatever story Voss and Arden had told themselves for 4 years was not clean enough to survive the page in my hand. Security entered in a flood of flashlights and commands. Holloway started speaking before anyone asked. He accused Voss of assault, Arden of coercion, both of them of isolating a student. The usual vocabulary institutions use when they smell scandal and do not care yet which direction guilt runs. I answered questions on instinct. Yes, I was here willingly. No, I was not restrained. Yes, Holloway had entered the house without permission. No, I did not know why. I said nothing about the archive room, nothing about the file. Nothing about Celia's statement that silence was mine. By the time the last guard left and Holloway was escorted out with a medic pressing gauze to his mouth, dawn was beginning to silver the edges of the east windows. The house looked exhausted, so did we. Arden sat on the bottom stair with one elbow on her knee, and blood drying in a thin line along her wrist. Voss stood by the fireplace holding an ice pack to her knuckles, like pain was an administrative inconvenience. I stood in the middle of their living room, holding pages that had reassembled my entire life into something unstable and unfinished. No more omissions, I said. My voice sounded older than it had yesterday. Neither woman argued, so Voss told me the rest. Or as much of the rest as she knew. Celia had indeed been trying to trace a younger half-sister. A child moved through sealed custody arrangements after a quiet family scandal involving trustees, donations, and reputation management. Mary Ann Vale had approached Celia under the guise of helping. Holloway had been present at least twice. Arden discovered late that there were institutional records linking the Vale Foundation to special scholarship placements and welfare reviews at Blackthorn-sponsored schools. Before they could press harder, Celia disappeared. We believed Holloway helped make her disappear, Arden said. Voss looked at the pages in my hand. Now I think he only cleaned the road after someone else started the fire. My mother, I said. No one answered. That was answer enough. I should have broken then. Should have cried. Should have screamed. Instead, I asked the cruelest thing first because my body had apparently chosen survival by precision. Did you love her too much? Arden's face crumpled in a way that made me immediately regret breathing the question into the room. Voss looked at me for a long time. Then she said with no defense left anywhere in it. Yes, Arden whispered. And not always well, there it was. The thing hidden beneath all the danger and mystery and institutional rot. Not innocence, not monstrosity. Something more unbearable. Loathe that had become fear, fear that had become control. Control that had become one of several forces closing around a woman already trying to run. I wanted to hate them. It would have been easier. Instead, I hated the fact that even now, standing in their house with dawn on the windows, and blood on their skin and their dead not dead girl between us, I still wanted to move closer, because human hunger has terrible timing, because confession is often the most intoxicating thing in the world, because knowing where people are broken can make them more magnetic, not less. I should leave, I said. Arden closed her eyes. Voss said nothing, neither begged. That restraint nearly undid me more than if they had fallen to their knees. I turned toward the front hall, stopped halfway there. Turned back. Did she ever come back? I asked. Voss frowned slightly. What do you mean? After. In secret. Letters? Calls? Anything? A silence bloomed. Too heavy, too immediate. Arden looked at Voss. Voss looked at Arden, and in that instant I knew. Someone contacted one of you. No answer. My pulse stuttered once. Which one? Arden stood. Not quickly, carefully, as if any abrupt movement might shatter the last fragile version of trust in the room. It was 2 months after she vanished, she said. One email from an encrypted address. I stared at her. You never told the police? No. You never told her? I looked at Voss now. Arden's face went white. Voss did not move at all, which was worse. What did it say? Arden's voice was nearly inaudible. Tell Mira not to follow. I left because I still loved her enough to know she would destroy herself if I stayed. The room dropped into silence, so complete the clock on the mantel sounded obscene. I looked at Voss, at the stillness she was wearing like armor welded onto skin. You didn't know. She met my eyes, and in them I saw something I would never forget as long as I lived, not anger, not betrayal, the exact shape of a wound discovering years too late that it had been deliberately kept open by someone who claimed to love both sides of it. No, Voss said. Arden took a step toward her. Mira, I was trying to protect you. If you had known she was alive, you would have torn apart every institution, every city, every person in your path trying to find her. Voss laughed once, a terrible sound. You do understand that is not a defense. Tears stood in Arden's eyes. I know. And you let me bury her. I let you survive her. That landed like a blade. Not because it was fully true, because part of it was, I should have left then. Every instinct said go. 2 professors. 1 hidden email. 1 vanished woman. 1 mother whose name now clung to old administrative poison. Nothing in that house led toward safety. Instead, I stood there while the sun rose and watched the 2 women who had spent years preserving a memory begin finally to break over the truth of each other. Voss set down the ice pack. Walked straight to Arden. Stopped so close their breaths mingled. Did you love me? She asked with horrifying calm. Or did you only love who I became when I was grieving? Arden made a sound I felt in my spine, not quite a sob, not yet. Both, she said. There are confessions that make witnesses feel guilty for existing in the same room. That was one. Voss turned away first, not dramatic final looking. I said her name before I meant to. Mira. She stopped, just that, the smallest halt in motion, yet it altered the whole room, because I had never used her first name before, because she reacted to it like she had been struck somewhere vulnerable and private. When she turned back, every controlled thing in her face had become more dangerous, not less, softer in the wrong places, sharper in the right ones. You should go, she said to me, not because she wanted me gone, because she knew she should. Arden looked at me then, and I understood with sick clarity that she, too, wanted exactly the opposite of what she was about to say. You should, she whispered. The honesty of it nearly broke me, because this was the impossible center of everything now. They were not trying to trap me, not in that moment, not with words, and that made staying far more dangerous than if they had. I walked to the foyer, got my coat, put on my shoes with fingers that did not feel connected to me. Behind me, neither woman moved, neither followed. No dramatic plea, no final argument, only the weight of 2 gazes on my back so intense, it felt almost like touch. I opened the front door, cold dawn air rushed in. Wet earth rain, the scent of leaves beginning to rot into winter, 1 foot onto the porch, then another. My phone buzzed. I closed my eyes, already knowing, already dreading, already wanting and fearing the same thing at once. No number. I opened the message, not text, a photograph, taken just now, from inside the hedge line across the drive. Me on the porch, the open door, and behind me, visible in the hallway mirror, Mira Voss and Elise Arden standing side by side at a distance they were no longer pretending was professional, watching me leave as if the act were tearing skin. Under the photo, 1 line. Celia came back for them once. Are you going to make the same mistake? Before I could think, another message arrived. This one with an attachment audio file delength 0 minutes 37 seconds. My hand shook as I pressed play stack first. Rain footsteps, then, a woman's voice. Low and breathless and unmistakably real. Not a memory, not an old recording from some analog archive. Recent. Alive, Celia. I know you found her, the voice said. If Lena is hearing this, do not trust the story any of us told about love. Not mine, not theirs, especially not your mother's. My blood turned to ice. In the background, another sound moved, metal, perhaps, or a door. Then Celia again. Faster now. If they've already started looking at you the way they looked at me, it's too late for distance to save you. So listen carefully, one of them is still lying, and if you come find me, come alone. The recording cut. I stood frozen on the porch with rain beginning again in fine silver lines. Behind me, the house held 2 women I could not stop thinking about. Ahead of me, the hedge line held whoever had just watched me listen. Somewhere beyond both, a dead not dead woman with my face had just warned me that one of the only people I wanted to trust was still lying. I turned slowly. Mira and Elise were still in the doorway, still watching, still beautiful in the ruin of dawn, still dangerous in 2 entirely different ways. And for the first time since this began, I understood the true shape of the trap. It was not that I looked like the woman they lost. It was not even that they wanted to keep me close, because grief had never loosened its hands. It was that somewhere between fear and confession, and the way their eyes followed me through every room, I had already begun to want the exact thing I should run from. Their attention, their protection, their ruin, all of it. I should have left. I should have called the police. I should have gone straight to the train station, changed my number, burned every bridge that led back to Blackthorn and its beautiful predators and its old money graves. Instead, I looked at them, lifted the phone with Celia's voice still burning in it, and realized with absolute horror that I was already deciding which one of them I would follow first. And that was the moment I understood. I was not standing at the beginning of someone else's story. I was walking straight toward the part that destroys me,